All right. Well, before I jump in all the way to our message this morning, I did want to remind you of something that you may or may not have heard about so far. We are part of this network. It's an Irresistible Church network, and because of that, we have an opportunity to join partner and become partners with Right Now Media. So Right Now Media is potentially the largest, to my understanding, to my knowledge, it's the largest faith-based library of video content in the whole world. So, and you have access to it. And the way that you get this, there's apps there. You can log in online. You can put it on your phone, your iPad, whatever. All you need to do is have us have your email, and we will send you the link, and you can set up your account, and you can run with it. So there's great kids content. There's great adult content, Bible study. There's everything, anything and everything in there. So if you did not see an email from me with that invite and you would like it, all you got to do is let us know that you would like it. So out in the lobby, there's a Get Connected card. You can fill that out, put your information on there, and just make sure you say, we want to be part of the Right Now Media. We want access to that, and I'll make sure that you get that. You can give it away, too. Like, if you know someone that needs this as a resource, as a parent, they're like, there's nothing on TV for my kids to watch. I hate everything. I get it. This has some great kids content on there as well. So give it away. It's free resource. We want to do this for you because we want you to be able to develop and grow in the direction of a Heavenly Father that loves you. So that's it for Right Now Media. Moving forward, though, we are starting this brand new series called Relationship Rules. And I've got to be honest with you. Okay, this is a pastor thing, but whenever a pastor presents information, especially a certain topic, often, not every time, but often there's like a challenge leading up to that Sunday the week before. So I always, anytime there's a relationship series on the calendars, like I love them because I'm a big relationship guy. I like people a lot. And I also know like there's going to be a challenge. There's going to be a hurdle. And at some point this week, I just crashed and burned over that hurdle. It was like, yeah, this is going to be a relationship series, and I am failing horribly in this moment. So I have to apologize, Moa, over and over and over again, and just thank her for her forgiveness. Relationships are hard, though, right? This is the reality. Relationships are super hard. And you get in that tense moment where you have two different opinions. You're looking at each other, you're like, you need to back down. And they're like, you are completely wrong. You need to back down. Elevated voices, like the room temperature gets a little bit hotter. Everybody, like everything is just up here. The emotions are already up, right up in your neck. Like that's where it goes. Relationships are incredibly hard. They're incredibly valuable and important, but they're so difficult sometimes. And if you're in a dating relationship right now and you're starting off and you're like, oh, except for ours, right? Don't worry, you'll get there. It'll happen. And if it's not hard yet, that just means that you're not being fully authentic. Like, that's the reality. Because we're individuals. We want the other person to become like us because our way, our perspective is the right one. So they need to become more like us. If you haven't got to that point yet, you will. Don't worry about it. But relationships are hard because we're individuals. That's why. One of my favorite pieces that I get to do, and I can't call it premarital counseling because I'm not a licensed counselor, so I just call it help, like premarital meetings that we go through. And one of my favorite meetings that we have during that season, it's called Rules of Engagement, How to Fight. Like it is, that's all we're talking about. That whole night, it's how to fight. Why? And people usually go, aren't you supposed to tell us how not to fight? Like, no, no, because you're going to fight. It's going to happen. And I want to give you tools, resources. I want to make sure that you are ready in that moment, that you know what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. How to protect the relationship in the midst of conflict, because there's going to be conflict regardless. And over time, hopefully get better at navigating around the conflict. You're able to address some of those pieces, but there's going to be conflict in relationships. So to give you the idea of like, here's some rules that we have that can help you out in those tense moments. And this doesn't have to be a dating relationship either. This can work with family. This can work with your boss. This can work with all kinds of different relationships. But ultimately, this is an understanding for you and possibly the other person, but at least for you, to have this parameters set for the relationship. What is healthy? What is right? What is good? Where the direction that you want the relation to move in? and how to make sure that you're protecting that direction without slipping out of it. So we're going to go through, these are not necessarily the rules that we went through in the premarital stuff. These are just rules for relationships as a whole throughout this series that we're going to be going through the next several weeks. So here's a couple thoughts to just start off with. Relationships don't work because we have rules. You're like, oh, well, that's not going to be the end-all, be-all to it. Like, you're going to give me rules and then it's automatically going to work out. No. And I have enough teacher friends that they all have rules in their classroom. Every single teacher, every single class I've ever been in has rules, and it doesn't always work out well, right? Just because you have rules doesn't mean it's going to be the ideal. However, the rules that are there are typically there for a reason, and if we can navigate those, it helps everybody out. So relationships don't work because we have rules. Relationships work when each person is looking out for the other person's interest. When you decide, you know what, I mean, I know what I think and what I believe, and I know what my opinion is, but I'm going to think about the other person first. I'm going to move in their direction first. I'm going to open myself up for them to have an avenue to have a voice. Just because I think I'm right, I'm going to allow them space where they can voice their own opinion as well before I shut them down. Because we all know this, right? In a relationship, especially like romantic relationships, someone is better at debating. And they're not always right, but they make the other person feel wrong. Anybody else? That's me. I'm real good at it. I'm real good, specifically with my wife. Nobody else. I like to give everybody else plenty of room, not necessarily her this week. I need some help, guys. I need some help. But throughout the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about these rules. They're going to help us prioritize the relationship and what really is important within it. And honestly, like I said, it doesn't just have to be a dating relationship or a marriage relationship. It could be any relationships at all. And all of us have some type of relationships. This is going to benefit all of us. Even if you're not like across the line of faith, you're like, is this just going to be a Jesus thing? Well, for sure, you're at a church, so there's going to be some Jesus involved. But you're going to be able to implement this in all of your relationships, regardless of where you're at in your faith journey. So to start off this morning, I'm going to ask a big, huge question. At the end of your life, what is going to matter the most? Have you ever thought about this? Sometimes it gets uncomfortable. We're like, I'm going to stop thinking about that. That's going to be so far on, like down the road, I don't need to worry about that. This is a big, important question, though, because you're in your life now. You're never going to get today back. You're walking in a direction. You're never going to go backwards in life as far as walking towards the end of life. So what's going to matter the most at the end of it? There's this study done. It's actually continuing on. This is one of the longest studies as far as sociology goes, that it started in 1938 by some smart folks in Harvard. They tend to be that. But so there's this group of people. It's called the Grant Study. 268 individual people were put into this study. They were all sophomores in college at that time. And they wanted to study to see what allowed them to move in the direction of health and happiness. Like if they could study lives over time to see what it was that allowed people to experience health and happiness. And it expanded a little bit later in the 1970s. Another 456 people got added into it. This is kind of a separate arm of the Grant Study, but it's included within it. The second study is called the Gluck Study, and that's actually 456 Boston residents got added into this. They're just like, well, I mean, Harvard students, that's a pretty narrow demographic, so they just opened it up. So Boston residents, 456 of them got thrown in there as well. And so this has been a study that's gone on over decades. 1938 it started, 70s expanded. Still today, I think there's still over right around 40 people that are still alive and living that are in this and part of this study. And here's what they found. There's some key findings in this, if you can imagine. Over decades and decades, over about 700 people in this study. They found that relationships, the closeness, the quality of relationships are more important to your happiness, your peace, your enjoyment, your health in life, more important than finances, more important than power, more important than success in your career. It's one of the most important things as far as your happiness, your health, your overall attitude in life is because of the quality of your relationships. There's another study done, and this is where some researchers went into medical facilities when people were kind of in the last stage of life. So they're in the last season of life. And they asked these people that knew that life was almost at an end. And they asked them, right now, for you, what is most important? Knowing that you're almost to the end, what's most important? This is a question, like I said, it's uncomfortable for us to ask. But these people in this situation, these folks, they knew it. They knew it. And this is what they found out. The quality of our lives is only as good as the quality of our relationships. That not even your physical health is as important in order for you to experience the quality of life as your relationships and the depth and quality of your relationships. And we kind of know this. Like intrinsically, when we talk about it, you're like, I mean, to put it in those words, that's great, that's fascinating, but I understand, like I agree with that, that makes sense. That kind of fits into my understanding of the world and how this all works. Because I know in my life, when my relationships are right, when my relationships are healthy, when wherever I go, it's like, yep, that was positive, that's positive, I can deal with some of the other struggles, some of the other frustrations that life just throws at you if your quality of relationships are there. Right? We know this. We understand this. This is not a massive, big leap for us. But if we know this, if it's not a big shock, like, oh my gosh, relationships are important, then why is it when the temperature gets turned up in the room and someone squares up with you, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, so what's your opinion about Bud Light lately? You're like, oh, are you asking if I'm going to drink it, or what are we talking about? If you don't know what that's about, then don't worry about it. But like when someone has a very strong opinion and you do also, and it's different, if we know that the relationship is important, if we know the relationship speaks to the quality of life that we're going to have, why is it that we just cannot let it go? We have to verbalize. We have to vocalize what we think is right. And we will end relationships over an opinion about something that you will never even experience. It's just a perspective. Why do we do this? Part of this is about our language. Language matters. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. Language matters. And when we decide to categorize someone with a descriptive term, we put them in a box, right? We love to do this. We're really good at doing this. It's like we study the person in order to categorize them. You know what? Well, they're just controlling. Oh, that's what they are. I figured it out. You're just controlling. That's what you are. Or you're lazy. That's the problem. And I've seen it over and over and over again. You're just a lazy person. I put you in that box. Now I see all of the evidence, past, present, and future. I know you're going to be in that lazy box because that's what you are. We've defined the person. You're entitled. You're hateful. You're a socialist, you're a Marxist, you're racist, like whatever it is we describe the person as, and eventually we start to load the ammunition, like we load the gun with all of the evidence that we have. Yep, that's just what they do. You hear something, they say something, somebody else says something, you're like, yeah, that sounds exactly like him. Did you expect anything else? Of course she's going to respond that way, because we do this. We're really good at it. We're all guilty of this, right? All of us are guilty of this. There's only one benefit for guilt, though. If we're guilty of something, there's only one benefit of guilt. And that is we allow guilt to move us to change. When we know that we're doing something that's not beneficial, that's not healthy, that's not right, if we feel guilty about it, the only benefit to feeling guilty is if we change our behavior. If we feel guilty about something and don't do anything different, that's like insanity, right? When you try to do the exact same thing and expect a different result, that's what that is, insanity. We do this all the time in relationships. I don't know, I keep on saying, of course, she's still entitled because I keep on seeing all the evidence. I don't know why she's not changing. Maybe you have something to do about that. Maybe you can impact, maybe you can affect that other person. So, here's some ideas and some big thoughts that we're going to be working on through today. How you see someone changes how you treat them. If you see someone in a very specific box, it's going to determine how you treat them. Right? So sight, your vision, how you see someone, how you experience someone, determines how you're going to treat them. How you treat someone changes how you feel about them. If you treat someone the same way over and over and over again, that's going to imprint an emotion. There's going to be a feeling attached to that person because of the way that you've treated them over and over. This is a chain reaction. And the important part to start the whole chain reaction is how we see them, how we see the person. It's difficult though, right? It's hard to be patient with someone that's lazy. Just get up, just stand up and do something. Like I would like if you would put any effort at all into changing. Like just go do something now. It is hard to be kind to someone that we've placed squarely in the cruel box. You're like, you know what? They're just mean. I don't want to be nice to a mean person. That doesn't feel good. I want to be mean to a mean person. That feels better. It's hard to be kind to a cruel person. We put them in the box, though. We've defined them. We see them very specifically, and it affects our relationship. It affects how we treat them. It affects how we feel about them. Now, if you are a Jesus follower, meaning you've decided, the church might be crazy, but I understand that Jesus died on the cross for my sins. I've accepted him as my Lord and Savior. I've decided not just to believe, I'm going to follow. I'm going to pattern my life in his direction. And I might not get it right all the time, but that's for me. That's my priority. That's my highest value. That's the direction I move. If you are a Jesus follower, for us, this starts when we see someone as God sees them. That lets all the air out of our anger balloon. Like all of a sudden, it's just like, but can't he see them like I see them? Because that's way more fun. When we have to change our perspective on how we see someone, it changes everything. We're impacted not just by this thought, but by how God sees us. If you think God sees you in a very specific light, that you have to earn your way, you have to do enough, that his grace and mercy is for everybody else, but not for you. You've done too much. Your history is too bad. You've gone overboard and there's no coming back. If that's how you see yourself through God's eyes, if that's how you think that God sees you, that's going to impact how you see and treat everybody else as well. So we're going to talk about how God sees you and sees everyone this morning. There's a verse, it's in, I want to call it a letter, but it's more of like an entire manuscript. It's a big idea message that Paul, the Apostle Paul, wrote to the Christians in Rome. So in Romans chapter 5, verse 8, he said, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." He didn't say, okay, you got to get your stuff right, and then I will make the sacrifice for you. He did it in the moment while we are still sinners. You know what's interesting about this verse? We could deconstruct this, we could tear this apart and just work on it for a long time. We could chew on this for a long time. But this term right here, demonstrates. You notice the tense? It's not that God demonstrated that one time, a long time ago, his love for us. It's continuous. It's constant. He's still demonstrating it now. It's still active right now. God demonstrates his own love for us. And this love that he's talking about, this is action love. This is not like just a happy thoughts and feelings. Okay, I talked about this a little bit this morning. One of my pet peeves is when someone says, like an athlete gets hurt, and all of a sudden their social media blows up with everyone saying thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. And you know what? How many of those people are actually praying? We read it, we're like, they're praying? Oh my goodness, they love Jesus. That's not reality. It's just a thing that people say. It's cliche. Thoughts and prayers. It's a nice thing to say for somebody else. But the reality is there's a far larger percentage of people that are doing nothing else other than gaining a little bit of appearance publicly that they have happy thoughts towards this person. Great. Those happy thoughts don't do anything for the person that's actually hurt. If you want to do something, actually pray. That'll actually do something, because we can invite God, creator of all, into a moment, into a circumstance. But just thoughts and prayers, hashtag thoughts and prayers, like just that doesn't do anything. This love that Paul is writing about is an action love. It's acted out with his death, that Jesus died for us. And this love, this depth of love, this level of love continues to be acted out today. You know what? God knew. God knew that this needed to be ongoing. He created us. He knows me. And he knows that I'm going to need that same love every single day. That there cannot be a time limit on it, because I'm still a sinner. I still make mistakes all the time. I knowingly make mistakes. I know when I'm doing something wrong, I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing that. Still doing it. Probably shouldn't be doing that. Why am I still doing this? I don't know. I'm still doing it. This is what it is to be human. We sin. We like to soften it, call it make mistakes. It's sin. It's an active step away from God. And while we're actively stepping away from God, he is actively loving us and opening that door and moving in our direction. So think about this. Why? Why would God do that? It's like, have you seen that there's like a short video clip and there's like animals chasing each other? I think there's a giraffe and maybe a monkey or something. It's like, let me love you. And they're like running around. If you haven't seen it, it's fine. You don't understand anything I just said. But there's this idea that God is chasing us down. Like, he wants to love you. He wants to love you. And we, for whatever reason, want to run away from that love. Why would God do this? Because God doesn't view you just as a clay pot that he made. He views you as his son or his daughter. He views you as his own child that he loves more than anything. You know what I've learned as a parent now for a few years? There's a special level of anger if anybody mistreats my son. It's like there's a level of anger that's been reserved. It's like been stored in me my entire life, and I didn't even know it was there. But the moment that someone mistreats my son, there it is. I'm like, whoa, that's real. I have this anger towards this person because they're mistreating my son. It doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter how nice they are to me. If they're mistreating my son, I'm coming at you. Like, that's just, it's in us. And if that's in me, a broken earthly dad, how much more is that in our Heavenly Father that is perfect? I believe that God feels that. That there is something in us that is reflective of God our Father. How dare someone mistreat our children? And God would say that about you and me. How dare someone mistreat you? And it's not that he's angry at the other person, but he's angry. He's angry that this mistreating is happening. This is the same God that loves you, loves the person across from you. Even if they haven't said the same prayers you have, he still loves them. So this leads us to rule number 1 in our relationship rules. I will treat every person as someone Jesus died for, because they are and he did. Every single person. There's not a person alive. You imagine this? Like, yeah, Jesus didn't die for you. It's like, you didn't make the cut. Jesus died for all of us. And the person that you are in conflict with, the person that you have animosity towards, the person that you can't even stand to sit next to, Jesus died for them just as much as he died for you and for me. There's an illustration. There's a lot of illustrations here, but there's this moment where Jesus, as he's as he's going towards the cross, right? A couple weeks ago we had Easter. Easter is not the celebration of Jesus' death. Easter is the celebration that Jesus rose from death. He conquered death, right? But that death moment was brutal. And Jesus has this moment where he's arrested in the dark. He has this trial against him where they have like people just trying to lie to corroborate, to try to figure out something in order to convict him on. They take him to the governor because the governor is the one that can actually get him to be crucified. The temple can't do that, so it has to be a Roman official. And they take him before Pilate, the governor. And there's this unique thing that happens at this time. It's in context. We're not going to get into it. But there's this tradition that the Pilate, the governor, is allowed to bring two convicted criminals onto stage and allow the crowd to decide which one gets to go home free. Completely forgiven. You get to walk off, walk home. You can go. Forget about it. Like nothing happened. And Pilate, the governor, he doesn't feel right. Whether it's politically motivated or he has his own personal thing or whatever, he just doesn't feel great about crucifying Jesus. He doesn't really want to do it. If you read the text, you're like, man, he's trying to not. He's trying to make a way. And he's like, this is the last chance ever. He's like, you know what? Maybe if I had a criminal that was bad enough and then put him up on stage with Jesus, the crowd obviously is not going to want Jesus to die because it's Jesus and this is a criminal. So he pulls up Barabbas. And Barabbas is on stage, and this is an incredible moment. Barabbas is up in front. Jesus is up in front. Pilate's like, who do you want to be released? Who do you want to go home? You have the one over here, Barabbas, that's stolen from, that's taken from. He's a thief. He's a thug. His second home is the jail. Like, he's a pretty bad guy. This guy, his entire life has been about taking life away from other people, one way or another. And then over here, in the other corner, you have Jesus, who his entire life has been healing people and bringing life back to them. Which one do you want to set free? And you know this. The crowd shouts, set Barabbas free. We want to crucify Jesus. There's this moment, and this is not like documented anywhere, but I have to think on that stage that Jesus and Barabbas make eye contact after this was decided. Before Barabbas was free, before Jesus was led away. They look at each other. Barabbas is looking at Jesus thinking, man, you got the short end of that stick. Like, I don't even, what luck I must have today. This is amazing. And Jesus has an entirely different thought. As he looks to Barabbas, he thinks, I'm going to be standing in your place, paying your debt today. And it's not just you. I will do that for every single person from now until the end of time. I am here to pay that same debt. I'm here to stand in your place. I'll do whatever it takes to pay your debts. And Jesus did. He took on the shame, the guilt. He took on the blame and stood in the place of Barabbas. And Barabbas walked away free. Why? This is the picture of what love looks like. Let's look at Romans 5:8 a little bit differently. But God demonstrates his own love in this. While Barabbas was still a sinner, Christ died for him. I mean, I don't know what happened with Barabbas after this. I would hope that watching this would change something in him. It would do something in him. And I would hope for you and me, when we understand this, that we would see life a little bit differently as well. Because Barabbas could never do anything to earn that back, to pay Jesus back. He could never earn it. He could never be good enough to do that. This was a gift. Jesus stood in his place. Barabbas would never have that option. He would never have that opportunity to stand in Jesus' place. Jesus was perfect. Jesus was without sin. Barabbas, this broken, dishonest, selfish, loved person. And Jesus stood in his place. And Jesus stands in our place as well. When we come face to face, when we square up with that person, and you feel it, your hackles get up, like you're like, the hair on your arm is standing up, your hands like make fists all of a sudden, you're like, oh, it's on. Game on. Let's go. Gloves off. We're going to do something today. We're going to work this out right now. Next week, we're going to talk about empathy. We'll get there. But for today, this is what we're after. To change the way we treat someone, we have to first change the way we see them. And the way that we see someone is the way that God sees them. This is so incredibly powerful. You want to change your relationship with anyone. Doesn't matter. Boss, employee, coworker, neighbor, family member, spouse. You want to change something? Change how you look at them. Don't look at them through your eyes. Remember what Jesus did on their behalf. How God sees them. This is so incredibly powerful. And honestly, this is something that the church has not done historically well. We're not the perfect example of what this looks like, unfortunately. We need to do better than this, than what we've done. If you've been on the receiving end of that, if you've walked into a church in the moment of pain, in the moment where you were seeking and searching for any type of hope, and instead of hope, you were handed judgment, I'm sorry. I apologize. That's not a good example of Jesus. That's not what he looks like. You shouldn't be handed judgment where you're looking for hope. Because Jesus hands out love first and foremost. Before you ever do anything, he hands out that love. Our hope is not anchored into behaving perfectly. Right? This isn't about behaving perfectly. That's not where our hope is anchored. Our hope is anchored to a risen Savior. Jesus is his name. That is where our hope lies, and in nothing else. Because it is Jesus that saves us, regardless and in spite of our imperfection. I don't have a whole lot of practical things to do for this morning. Sometimes we try to have here, do this, 1, 2, 3. I don't know, maybe this is something practical you do. Think about the most difficult relationships that you have, like the top 2, top 3, the ones that you have the most tension with, the ones that you are just about to give up on. And maybe you can make a list of why there's so much turmoil in those relationships. Why you're adamant that you will not forgive them. Write it down. And then make a second list next to each of those names and describe the way that Jesus sees them and what he's done for them. And then maybe see if that affects how you see them differently. Take them out of that box that you've seen them in and look at them through that lens as Jesus sees them. So, this is the direction that we move. This is how we change our relationship, by viewing first. It's how we see them. It's our sight. It's our vision. This rule number 1. I will treat every person as someone Jesus died for, because they are and he did. Jesus died for every single person, and he loves every single person. I hope that we are someone that rather than pushes people away, we draw people toward. That we can be a lure rather than a wedge. And we lead that way, not because we're perfect, not because we can out-debate someone, but because we can love them like Jesus. We can try to move in that direction. I do have some questions for us this morning, though, as I wrap up here. Relationships are both important and difficult. How would you evaluate your overall relational health right now? We usually don't stop and think about this and ponder about this very often. But if you just take a snapshot, look at your overall relational health. What's it look like? What grade would you give yourself right now? Next question. Has someone changed how they treated you after they learned more about you? Could that be true of your current challenging people? The reason why this is so huge, God knows us, not just the us that we project. He knows our backstory. He knows the us that we try to hide. He knows the us that we've convinced ourselves that we're not like, but we really are. He knows the true us and still loves us. You know what changes, though? When you find someone's backstory, when you think they're just a mean person, they're just an angry person, they're just a lazy person, they're just a broken person, when we find out their backstory and why they're broken, that changes how we view them, doesn't it? So, how about you? Could we allow that margin in our relationship to give them a little bit more space? Next question. Do you see others or yourself as Barabbas? This is the way I try to word it. Do you see others or do you see yourself? Those are kind of two questions. Do you see others or do you see yourself as Barabbas? Which one of you in your vision is like Barabbas? How should we treat those Jesus died for? Is there anyone Jesus didn't die for? It's just a fun question to ask. These are questions that I hope that you engage with. I hope that you continue this conversation, this thought process outside of this room, because that's where your relationships are. You can have all the great thoughts in here, but you know what? They're not in here right now. You haven't. Maybe they are, but you haven't had the conversation. You have to have the conversation out there. You have to do something different out there. Let me pray, and we're going to close up today. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, and we thank you for yesterday, and every single day that you've gifted us. We thank you for our tomorrow, and we thank you that you loved us so much that you would die for us on our behalf, to stand in our place, to take on our burden, our shame, our guilt. And you did something about it. You made a way for us to have a relationship with you. God, I pray first and foremost that we would receive that gift, that we would step in your direction, that we would accept that love, that forgiveness, that grace, that mercy that you have for us. And then secondly, that we would extend that same type of love, that same brand of love, that same flavor of love to those around us. That we would see the example that you've given us, and we would extend that to those, even the hard relationships, even the difficult, challenging people that we have in our life. God, that we would learn how to love like you. That we would move in your direction, and this is how we follow you. God, we love you. We thank you that you first loved us. Pray that you would give us the wisdom to know what to do with what we've just heard, and the strength to do it. In your name I pray. Amen. Thanks for being here. Hope you come back next week for part 2 of Relationship Rules.